Hey there, and welcome. You're listening to Boring History for Sleep, where we take a slow, calming journey into the past. Tonight we're gently stepping into a world of discipline, duty, and distant drums, the life of a soldier in the Qing Dynasty, and the stories that branch outward from his world. The Qing Dynasty, China's last imperial dynasty, ruled from the mid-1600s to the early 1900s. Its soldiers were not just warriors, but messengers of imperial order, protectors of long-winding borders, and everyday people bound by routines, hardships, and expectations that few could imagine today. Together, across the quiet hush of 20 full segments, we'll explore what it felt like to wake up in a barracks on the cold frontier, the soft clack of cloth-wrapped boots, the quiet murmurs of command, the rituals of preparation. We'll follow their meals, their battles, their loves and their regrets, all with the kind of detail that invites stillness and reflection. Our story will unfold across 5 deeply immersive segments. First, we'll live a day in their boots. Then, we'll follow the life of one Qing warrior, through service, seasons, and silence. We'll then drift into mysteries of buried armour, vanished troops, and sacred military rites. Later, we'll wander through the palaces and elite lives, where military glory was adorned with silk and shadows, and finally we'll close with the slow erosion of tradition, the final march of the Qing soldier and what remains of him in the echoes of modern China. So take a deep breath, let go of your day, and imagine a different time, where history moved with a slower rhythm, and the soldiers of an empire walked beneath paper lanterns, through wind-blown gates, towards something far greater than themselves. Let's begin. Segment 1. Daily life immersion. Imagine the soft hush of early morning wind weaving through rows of wooden beams and tightly packed clay brick. It's the dawn of another day in a Qing military outpost, perhaps near the dusty outer provinces, far from the grand palaces of Beijing. The barracks stir not with sudden clamour, but with a slow, inevitable rhythm. The scrape of straw mats as men rise, the faint splash of cold water against skin, and the low murmur of voices still heavy with sleep. A Qing soldier's morning begins before the sun fully breaks the horizon. There's no alarm, only the rhythm of discipline, etched into muscle and memory. Most soldiers sleep in shared quarters, long halls lined with sleeping mats or elevated wooden bunks, depending on their rank or the prosperity of the garrison. Blankets are coarse and practical, often woven from hemp or wool, and they carry the scent of smoke, sweat, and time. Outside, the world is dim and pale. In the distance, perhaps a walled village stirs, or a quiet patch of forest trembles with early birdsong. But in the outpost, the first sounds of life are more controlled. The dull thud of boots being laced, the creak of belts tightened, the quiet ritual of dressing in uniform. The standard Qing military attire varies depending on the unit, but for most, it includes a thick tunic of dark blue or faded green, wide trousers tucked into gaiters, and a sash tied firmly around the waist. Their queue, the long braided hair mandated by Qing rule, is wrapped or pinned with quiet efficiency. As the barracks come to life, cooking fires are lit. In some posts, an assigned cook begins ladling congee, a thin rice porridge, into wooden bowls. The smell of boiling rice, sometimes accompanied by pickled vegetables or a salted duck egg, fills the room slowly. The meals are simple, built more for sustenance than satisfaction. Food shortages are common, especially in remote or recently mobilised areas. During harsh winters, the soldiers might supplement their meals with dried radish, hardtack, or foraged greens. Each bite is a ritual, quiet and contemplative. Talking is minimal, energy is preserved. Morning routines follow, weapons are checked. Bows unstrung overnight are now restrung. Matchlock muskets, introduced earlier in the dynasty and still used in various units, are carefully examined. The gunpowder is measured. Blades are tested against sunlight and fingernails. Everything must be in order. Qing military discipline relies not on spontaneity but on repetition. Drills, formations, calls, responses. Outside, the soldiers gather in the open courtyard. Rows upon rows of them form geometric precision, moving as one unit. Their officers, often older men in trimmed robes holding bamboo scrolls, bark gentle commands. Today's drills might involve formation marching, spear training, or archery. Each man repeats motions hundreds of times, a step forward, a pivot, a thrust, a retreat. Their bodies become instruments of memory. In the background, drums might sound, slow, deliberate beats marking the passage of time. The world outside this discipline can feel distant. For a soldier stationed far from the capital, the day is measured in duties and silences. Guard duty might involve hours atop a narrow wall, eyes scanning the road or river, watching for bandits, smugglers, or signs of rebellion. The Qing Dynasty spanned an enormous multi-ethnic empire, and outposts were often located in frontier regions, the deserts of Xinjiang, the highlands of Tibet, the forests near Manchuria. A soldier might serve alongside men who spoke different dialects or even belonged to entirely different ethnic groups: Han, Manchu, Mongol, Uyghur. In such diversity, communication is pragmatic. Orders are obeyed, greetings are minimal. The unspoken bond is one of shared burden. By midday, the sun rises higher, heat settles on armour and leather. If not on patrol or assigned a special duty, soldiers might return to shade, seated under overhangs or gathered near wells. Some repair their uniforms, others write letters, short, sometimes illiterate messages dictated to those who can write. Some carve charms or play simple games with coins or stones. Time is slow. Time is heavy. Meals again. This time perhaps a bit more generous. Boiled grains, maybe some stewed meat if the garrison has seen recent supplies. Pork, when available, is a treasure. Tea is often brewed, dark, bitter, sipped from wooden cups. The act of drinking tea is steady, methodical, one sip at a time, one breath between. As the day wanes, responsibilities shift. Some units may be sent out, scouting, escorting couriers, watching over local villages. Others rotate into training again. Younger recruits are tested, their strength, their resolve, their ability to follow orders without hesitation. The older ones observe, hands behind backs, eyes scanning for weakness or spirit. Evening draws close with a softness unique to military routine. Shadows lengthen over the compound. Fires are relit. The smell of smoke blends with dust. Rituals resume. Weapons are cleaned, boots inspected, tents secured. The day folds in on itself. The barracks are swept. Reports written. Lanterns lit. As night approaches, the barracks return to silence. Quiet laughter might ripple in one corner. A song, low and steady, perhaps from a soldier missing home, weaves through the wooden beams. Others sit alone, eyes on the stars, fingers running along the worn hilt of a blade. It is in these quiet hours that the contrast is felt most deeply. The unity of service, the vastness of solitude. Imagine lying down now on a stiff sleeping mat. The wood beneath your body remembers every movement. Your breath slows. Outside, a bell chimes, perhaps the changing of the guard. One man rises, another returns. The door creaks open, then shut. Sleep comes not with dreams, but with weight. The weight of duty, of discipline, of history stretching forward like a road unwalked. The life of a Qing soldier is not one of glory, but of rhythm. And in that rhythm, a strange peace can be found. And as we move further into this world, we'll begin to follow not just the day, but a life. A single story, nestled within the folds of a vast and ancient empire. Now that we've settled into the cadence of a Qing soldier's daily life, we can go deeper. Picture yourself in the quiet hours before dawn, not in the outer provinces this time, but closer to a larger garrison, perhaps in a lowland town somewhere near the Yangtze River. The seasons are changing. The air carries the chill of late autumn, and the sky holds the faint glow of an approaching sunrise. This garrison, a larger and more permanent installation, is home to hundreds of soldiers. Some have families in the nearby town. Others are here only for a season, stationed temporarily. The barracks in this location are sturdier. Stone foundations, tiled roofs, and large inner courtyards. Yet life inside remains simple. There's an orderliness to everything. Rows of boots at the entrance, spears stacked neatly along the wall, scrolls tacked beside the officers' quarters, detailing shifts and expectations. These barracks are not just sleeping spaces. They are small worlds of hierarchy, labour, and quiet survival. As the sun climbs, the courtyard fills again with the rhythm of drills. But unlike the basic drills of rural posts, here the training is more intricate. Complex formations, inspired by the 8 banners system, the backbone of Qing military organisation, are practised. Officers walk slowly among the ranks, correcting stances with a firm hand or a soft tap of a bamboo cane. These soldiers belong to a banner company, and each colour, yellow, red, blue, white, carries with it generations of tradition. In the early days of the dynasty, the banner system was both a military and social structure, encompassing everything from defence to farming to taxation. Now, in this later period, the banner soldiers still train, but their role is evolving. Some perform ceremonial duties, others serve as local guards or administrative enforcers. The meaning of soldier has blurred. Still, each morning begins with the same ritual. Salute the flag, repeat the codes of loyalty, practice the steps and strikes passed down from generation to generation. A new recruit arrives today, a boy of 16, wide-eyed and stiff with nerves. His father served in the same unit, and his older brother died during a campaign on the western frontier. The boy speaks little, but he listens well. An older soldier is assigned to guide him, to teach him how to knot his sash correctly, how to stand without swaying, how to balance a spear with grace. There is no ceremony in this initiation, only repetition. Days, then weeks will pass before his form is considered passable. He will wake and train, sleep and rise, each moment folding into the next until the rhythm becomes his own. By midday, the boy is seated with the others for lunch. A larger garrison means better supplies. Steamed buns, boiled cabbage, dried tofu, and a small portion of preserved fish make for a modest but hearty meal. The food is served communally. Soldiers gather in small circles, sharing from central bowls. Chopsticks clink softly, and the murmur of conversation hums beneath the open sky. There is laughter here, muted, worn down by fatigue, but genuine. One soldier tells a story of his hometown, a village surrounded by wheat fields where lanterns float on rivers during the harvest moon. Another recalls a drunken officer who fell into a pond during an inspection. These moments of levity punctuate the monotony. They offer a sense of human connection that survives even within the rigid shell of military life. Afternoons vary depending on season and duty. Some soldiers attend workshops, learning to repair leather armour, maintain firearms, or stitch their own garments. Others study old military texts under the guidance of literate officers. The Qing army valued knowledge as well as discipline. Books like the Wubei Ji, a comprehensive military encyclopedia, are copied and read aloud. Lessons cover geography, tactics, and the principles of Confucian loyalty. For some, especially the more educated or senior soldiers, this time includes writing reports or assisting in local administrative tasks. The Qing military often doubled as bureaucratic muscle, enforcing tax laws, resolving disputes, or aiding magistrates. A soldier might patrol fields during harvest season, ensuring quotas are met. He might escort prisoners or deliver imperial edicts. His sword, in such moments, is both symbol and tool. Evening drills resume before dusk. This time, they simulate real combat. Small group formations, mock charges, retreat drills. The clatter of wood against wood echoes in the courtyard. Dust rises beneath disciplined feet. Muscles burn, voices shout, then silence. Afterward, the bathhouse, a single, steamy room where soldiers strip down and scrub themselves clean with a rough cloth. The water is tepid, buckets are shared. Conversations here are quiet. Some hum familiar tunes. Others sit with closed eyes, letting the heat unwind their bones. The barracks at night are filled with soft lamplight. Scrolls unfurl, dice clatter. One man carves a chess piece from bone. Another writes a poem by candlelight. The characters crooked but sincere. These soldiers are not faceless. They are brothers, sons, husbands. Some carry trinkets. A daughter's hair ribbon, a carved amulet. A piece of jade smoothed by years of touch. They place these beside their bedding, small anchors of the life they left behind. As the sky darkens further, a bell sounds. It's the curfew signal. Voices fade, mats are unrolled, blankets pulled tight. The garrison quiets to a hush once more, but not all sleep. Night watchmen take their post, eyes scanning for fire, intrusion, or sudden illness. One walks the length of the wall, pausing to adjust a lantern. Another checks the stables, where horses snort softly, tails flicking in their sleep. In the command room, an officer pores over maps, red lines marking supply routes, blue ink denoting threats. Outside the walls, life continues. In the town beyond, lanterns bob gently from doorways. Dogs bark. wind rustles bamboo. And far off, the sound of a river lapping against its bank. And within the stillness of the garrison a world breathes, quietly, rhythmically, steadily, a life both simple and endlessly complex. The life of a Qing soldier, measured in drills, dust and discipline. But now, let's narrow our focus even further. What if we followed one of these soldiers not for a day, but for a lifetime? A story of one man, one thread in the vast tapestry of the Qing military world. His name, his journey, his rise, or fall, awaits us. The weight of tradition carries quietly in the backbones of every Qing soldier, and as we continue through the fabric of their daily lives, we begin to understand the layers of meaning behind every step, every silence, and every saluted bow. Today, let us trace the details of a particular post, one positioned not in the inner provinces, but high in the north, in the Manchurian territories where wind carries snow across flat steppes, and the pine forests creak with age. The Qing heartland, the ancestral soil of the ruling Isinjoro family. Here, the soldiers are more than guardians. They are living echoes of the dynasty's foundation. The barracks at this northern post are low and long, built of timber, stone and plaster, their eaves weighted with thick tiles to brace against storms. Winter here dominates the year. Even in spring, the chill clings to the air like a stubborn breath. Each soldier wraps in layers, quilted robes, woolen vests and fur-trimmed hats. Their boots are lined with felt. Even their queue is often tucked beneath scarves to protect it from frostbite. Early morning drills in this post begin with a fire, not a metaphor, a literal blaze built in a wide iron pit around which the men gather to warm their limbs before movement begins. An officer walks the circle, assigning roles. Some head to the nearby river to hack ice for water. Others tend to horses sheltered in adjacent barns. A few, the youngest or most recent arrivals, are tasked with snow sweeping, a thankless but necessary labour. The weapons used here differ slightly as well. While spears, bows and muskets remain common, the terrain demands adaptation. Snowshoes and sleds are employed in winter months. Cavalry units practice manoeuvres across frozen lakes, and skirmishes are simulated in wooded areas, where narrow footpaths must be navigated with caution. Yet even in these cold, isolated corners, the rhythm of military life holds. Wake, clean, drill, patrol, return. The food is heavier. Stews of cabbage and lamb, thick dumplings filled with turnip or mushroom, dark bread traded from local farmers. Meals are taken indoors with men crowding close to shared tables, steam rising from their bowls. After midday drills, soldiers might tend to their gear, greasing boots, sharpening blades, or replacing broken bindings. Others sit with scribes or officers, reporting changes in terrain, wildlife sightings, or traces of travellers. Border posts such as this often serve as first contact zones, not only for potential conflict but also for trade, migration or diplomatic messengers. Among these soldiers, many are Manchu by descent. Their families were once the vanguard of Qing conquest, and here the old customs still breathe. On certain days, archery is practiced not with muskets, but with horn bows strung with sinew. Targets are set far apart and the shooting is done from horseback. These sessions, called riding and shooting, are part tradition, part ritual, part necessary training. The commandant of this post is a tall man with a thin moustache and narrow eyes. He has served over 3 decades in the north. His voice is soft, almost indistinct, but his presence is never questioned. He reads Confucian classics before bed, and his quarters smell faintly of camphor and old paper. Soldiers speak of him with quiet reverence. He rarely punishes, he rarely praises, he observes and remembers. Some evenings he joins his men for tea. They sit in silence mostly, save for a few observations about weather patterns or hunting routes. Once, during a late snowfall, he recited a poem about pine needles and imperial longing. No one dared interrupt. The relationship between officers and soldiers in this post is different than in the south. Closer, more fluid. Shared hardship binds them. Here, loyalty is forged less through fear and more through mutual endurance. There is honour in survival. There is pride in quiet competence. Evenings are contemplative. The barracks hum with whispered songs. Old Manchu ballads about falcons and falling leaves. One soldier plays a 2-stringed fiddle. the notes thin and trembling like a thread in wind. Others write letters home, their brushstrokes shaky from the cold. A few mend gloves or carve bone charms in the shape of clouds or horses. There's a small shrine in the corner of the main hall. It's dedicated not to gods, but to ancestors, fallen soldiers whose names are etched on a wooden tablet. Incense burns there every night. Before bed, a soldier may bow once, touch the tablet lightly, then retreat without a word. The dreams in these barracks are often strange. Men speak of hearing wolves howl through the timber. Others claim to have seen fox spirits at the edge of the training fields. Folk tales travel with soldiers. Stories of snow ghosts, forest spirits, and ancient warriors watching from beyond the trees. These tales, told in low voices, are not meant to frighten, but to remind. That history is not just written in ink, but lives in wind, stone, and the spaces between breath. In this place, a soldier becomes more than his body. He becomes memory. He becomes repetition. He becomes part of a long, frozen chain of command stretching back through dynasties. A day passes, then another, then another. Life loops. Duty remains. And when a soldier is rotated out or his service ends, he carries with him not medals or fame, but the ability to walk through snow without sound, to wait without complaint, to move as one with his brothers. He carries the silence of the North within him, and as our understanding of his daily world deepens, we begin to see the shape of his heart, not in grand speeches or heroic gestures, but in the quiet folding of his blanket, the precise angle of his spear, the way he kneels before the fire to tend it for others before he sleeps. Soon we'll follow the life of one such man, a soldier whose journey begins in the inner provinces and stretches far beyond. But before that, let's complete our journey through the routines, this time through the lens of a temporary field camp set up during a military expedition. Let's now journey into the heart of mobility, the temporary field camps of the Qing army. These were neither towns nor fortresses, but transient settlements, assembled and disassembled with military precision. In these places we witness the soldier not in the comfort of barracks or beneath temple eaves, but exposed to the rhythm of campaign life, wandering, waiting, watching. Imagine a vast plain, perhaps in Inner Mongolia or along the Silk Road corridors, where the land stretches unbroken in every direction. Dust rises easily, carried by gusts of wind, and the horizon never sits still. Here, the Qing army has set up camp. Lines of white and ochre tents form a grid, each placed with care. Officers' tents sit at the centre, surrounded by those of lower ranks. Horses are tethered on the outskirts. Fires smoulder, releasing coils of smoke that vanish into the pale sky. A day in such a camp begins even before light breaks. Guards change over, their steps soft in the cold grass. Commanders emerge from their tents, wrapped in thick robes, their breath fogging in the air. The bugle sounds, a low brassy call that stirs the camp. Soldiers rise without complaint. There is no room for hesitation here. Each man knows his role. Some gather firewood, others check the perimeters, securing ropes and repositioning stakes. The cooks begin heating water. Horses are fed and groomed. Scouts prepare for the day's ride. There is no barracks wall here to offer protection. The sky is your ceiling, the earth your floor. Food is rationed. Often, it's dried beef, hard bread, boiled grains. Salt is precious. Tea is strong and smoky. Everything is practical. Meals are eaten squatting or seated on bundled cloaks. There are no chairs, no tables, just the quiet communion of necessity. A nod is enough. A grunt replaces conversation. After breakfast, orders are issued. A courier rides in from the nearest command post. Dust on his face, weariness in his eyes. He dismounts swiftly, bows, hands over a scroll. The officers gather around a small writing desk set up under a canopy. They speak in low voices. A decision is made. A unit will move east to scout the ridgeline. Another will stay and reinforce the southern edge. The soldiers selected begin their preparations. Armour is tightened, bows are checked, muskets slung across backs. Their movements are practised, fluid, unthinking. These men have done this before. They tie their supplies into bundles and fasten them to their belts. Then, in single file, they march off, the sound of boots muffled by grass and dust. Back in the camp, life continues. Some soldiers repair torn fabric using curved needles and coarse thread. Others clean weapons with oiled cloths. A group sharpens blades on whetstones, their arms moving in rhythm. Near the centre of camp, a young officer holds a short lecture, using a map drawn in the dirt. He explains a tactic used by rebel forces last season. His audience listens, heads bowed, occasionally asking a question. Not far away, a soldier carves notches into a stick, a method of marking days past or counting personal victories. Another sits cross-legged, reciting lines from a worn book of poetry. He speaks softly, the words barely audible over the wind. These small acts of humanity persist even in the impermanence of the camp. Suddenly there's motion. A signal flag is raised, riders spotted on the horizon, not enemy, messengers. But still the camp tenses. Everyone has a role when the unexpected appears. Some move to prepare defences, others run messages. Officers consult maps again. The camp is a breathing organism, responding as one. When the messengers arrive, they bring news from the capital. Promotions, supplies, decrees. The Emperor's seal pressed in red wax. For a moment, the distant world of Beijing feels closer. The men listen as the words are read aloud. A new tax code, a shift in strategy, a commendation for a general far from here. It's all part of the great machine. And yet, life here remains unchanged. Dust, hunger, waiting. Afternoon brings training. Even in the field, drills continue. Soldiers practice responding to fire signals, moving in formation between tents, and simulating nighttime ambushes. Timing is everything. Each man must know how many steps to take before drawing his sword, how to form a circle, how to retreat without panic. In one corner of camp, a sick soldier rests on a bedroll. He's being tended by a comrade who offers him sips of herbal tea from a gourd. There's no physician here, only shared knowledge, passed down in whispers and gestures. A cloth is soaked and pressed to his forehead. The camp adjusts to his absence. No complaint, no question. As dusk settles, the temperature drops. Fires are stoked again. Soldiers huddle in small groups. Some cook thin soup with leftover scraps. A few take turns telling tales, usually exaggerated accounts of past campaigns or ghost stories whispered with a smile. One man recounts how he once saw a tiger pacing along the ridge in twilight. Another claims to have met a woman in a red robe who vanished before he could speak. These stories serve no tactical purpose. They are a balm. And somewhere in the middle of it all a man sits quietly polishing his blade. His name is not important yet, but soon he will become the centre of our attention. For now, he is just another face in the crowd, focused, calm, watching. The final duties of the night are carried out with efficiency. Horses are tethered, fires reduced to embers, patrols begin their rounds. Officers make their last notes in leather-bound ledgers. The wind picks up, a flag snaps quietly in the breeze. Inside tents, soldiers wrap themselves in wool and fur. Some lie awake, staring at the fabric ceiling above, their minds tracing the roads behind and ahead. Others sleep instantly, too exhausted to dream. But for the few on watch, the night stretches long. They pace slowly, eyes scanning the perimeter. They listen for unnatural sounds, the snap of a twig, the shuffle of feet. And in that vast silence they become part of the land, shadows beneath stars. This is the final piece of the daily rhythm we needed, the field life. Now, with this understanding, we are ready. In the next segment, we will begin the journey of one man, a Qing soldier whose life we will follow in detail. From the moment he took his first oath, to the battles that shaped him, to the choices that defined his legacy. Segment 2, Biography, Event. His name was Lian Jun. Not a noble name, not one you'll find etched in grand monuments or scribbled across the pages of official history. But for our quiet journey through the fabric of the Qing military, he offers something far more precious. The story of a man shaped by duty, pulled by time, and weathered by war. Lian Jun was born in the summer of 1768, in a village near the banks of the Yellow River. His father, a former soldier himself, raised him with quiet discipline. Not through punishment, but through repetition. Every morning before the sun, the young boy would carry water, clean the family shrine, and practice drawing lines in the dirt with a wooden stick. Lines that mimicked the strokes of characters he could not yet read. When the wind was still, his father taught him how to breathe, slowly, from the stomach, as if preparing for battle. The village was small, surrounded by terraced fields and mulberry trees. During the silkworm season, the air would be filled with the faint, papery rustle of the caterpillars chewing leaves. In winter, the world turned grey and the river swelled. Floods were frequent. Hunger, too. But Lian Jun learned to find rhythm in scarcity. He learned to listen more than speak. By the time he was 10, he could identify the mood of the sky, the scent of approaching rain, and the gait of a man too tired to stand. When he was 13, a travelling magistrate came through the village. With him were 2 Qing soldiers, one Han, one Manchu, dressed in heavy robes and boots caked in dust. They spoke little, but to Lian Jun they looked like statues brought to life. That night he told his father he would serve like him. His father did not answer right away, but the next morning he gave Lian Jun a bundle: dried millet, a whetstone, and a worn hairpin that once belonged to his mother. Without a word he pointed east toward the nearest recruitment post. Lian Jun was 15 when he joined the provincial garrison. Not yet a man by the dynasty's standards, but large for his age and steady in manner. His hair was shaved according to regulation, the queue braided with ceremonial care. The first few months were difficult. He struggled with the matchlock musket, found the recoil jarring, but he excelled in archery. His breathing, slow and grounded, gave him unusual control. In the evenings he practiced with a straw target outside the barracks, sometimes long after the others had gone to sleep. By the time he was 18, he had been transferred to a border outpost near the southwestern highlands, a region of foggy mountains and winding rivers. It was a difficult place, plagued by malaria and banditry. Here, Lian Jun began to change. He spoke less, moved slower, carried his blade as though it were a natural extension of his arm. The first time he saw battle was not on a battlefield but during an ambush. His unit had been escorting a convoy of grain to a nearby town. They were attacked at dawn, a group of local rebels, poorly armed but desperate. The fighting lasted less than an hour. Lian Jun, without orders, had taken position along a ridge and picked off 3 attackers with his bow. When the dust settled, the officer in charge merely nodded. After that, Lian Jun's reputation grew. He was not the loudest, nor the most decorated, but he was consistent. He never fell ill. He never missed his watch. He never lost his footing. In 1793, when Lian Jun was 25, his unit was relocated to the capital region. It was the year the British envoy, Lord Macartney, arrived in China hoping to open trade negotiations. The Qing court bustled with distant murmurs of diplomacy, and the military presence was heightened. Lian Jun's unit was stationed near Beijing, tasked with ceremonial duties as well as maintaining order in the nearby districts. The capital was unlike anything he had seen. The Forbidden City loomed like a dream cast in red and gold. Scholars, eunuchs, merchants, monks, all walked the streets in a dizzying array of robes and dialects. Lian Jun moved through this world with careful steps. He rarely spoke unless addressed, and when off duty, he spent hours walking the alleys in silence, observing the way laundry fluttered like flags, the way old men played go beneath ginkgo trees. But peace did not last. In 1796, the White Lotus Rebellion erupted across multiple provinces. It began as a religious movement but grew into a full-scale uprising, fueled by resentment over corruption, taxes, and natural disasters. The emperor dispatched soldiers in waves, and Lian Jun was among them. His new campaign took him back south. Months turned into years. Villages burned, roads crumbled, forests became graveyards. The enemy was elusive, striking from shadows, hiding among civilians. It was not a war of honour, but of attrition. Lian Jun learned to read the forest like a scroll. He stopped using maps. He trusted birds, smoke, and soil. During one siege, his unit ran out of powder. They fought with blades and spears. Lian Jun led a silent charge at night, using only moonlight and memory to navigate. His commanding officer commended him afterward, not with words, but by assigning him to train younger soldiers. It was the first time Lian Jun smiled in months. Years passed. The rebellion was eventually quelled, but peace was bitter. Many soldiers never returned home. Lian Jun did. His hair was now streaked with grey, his fingers bent from cold and strain, but he still walked with the straightness of a bowstring. He was promoted to sergeant and sent to a riverside post to oversee training. Here, he began to write. Short notes, observations, lessons. He kept a journal, carved characters with care. He taught recruits not only how to march, but how to endure. "Your body will follow your breath," he wrote once, "but your breath must follow the wind." In 1810, when he was 42, he requested a return to his home province. The request was granted. His village had changed. His father was gone. But the mulberry trees still rustled, and the river still whispered against the banks. He did not retire. Instead, he became the local commander, overseeing a small detachment that protected nearby farms and patrolled trade roads. He worked until his 60th year. Then one morning he simply failed to wake. No illness, no injury, just stillness. The village elders held a quiet ceremony. They placed his journal on the family shrine and lit incense made from mountain herbs. His blade was buried with him, wrapped in cloth. The stone marker bore only his name, and a line he once wrote, "In silence, there is strength. In strength, peace." Lianjun's story is not one of grandeur. He never met the emperor. He never claimed a title. But his life, like so many Qing soldiers, was a bridge between duty and the everyday. A thread in a vast tapestry, woven not with gold, but with dust, sweat, and quiet resolve. And with this thread, we begin to see the human shape of history. Next, we will explore mysteries from the past, archaeology, culture, and secrets left behind by men like Lianjun. Not through legend or myth, but through fragments unearthed, stories deciphered, and questions still unanswered. As we continue the story of Lianjun, let us slow down the rhythm of his life and dwell more closely in those middle years, the years that often go unmarked, not because they lack meaning, but because their meaning is so embedded in routine, duty, and the unspoken weight of time. It is now the year 1801. Lianjun is 33. He is no longer a new recruit, nor the wide-eyed boy who first dreamed of service beneath the banner. His hands are thick and scarred. His hearing is sharp, not from youth, but from decades of attunement as to orders, footsteps, the twang of a string pulled taut. The White Lotus Rebellion still smoulders in pockets across the empire. Lianjun is stationed in the humid southern interior, in a province of red clay roads, tall grasses, and endless rivers that thread through rice fields and banyan groves. He lives in a modest outpost near the base of a mountain, one that locals say is home to old spirits and wandering monks. This region is not at war exactly, but neither is it at peace. Rebellion, theft, and famine blur the lines between criminal and insurgent. Lianjun's unit is responsible for patrolling a stretch of road that connects several villages to a trading hub where salt, cloth, and ink are exchanged. Caravans pass frequently, guarded by hired men with wide hats and quick tempers. Conflicts are common, not always bloody, but tense. Lianjun approaches these moments with a presence that diffuses rather than escalates. He is known for standing still, motionless, spear-grounded, shoulders squared, and waiting until tempers cool themselves. It's a kind of patience no training can teach, one learned only by years lived between noise and silence. One evening during a patrol, Lianjun comes upon a child, no more than 7, sitting alone near a shrine beside the road. The boy says nothing, just looks up. Lianjun kneels beside him. No questions, just waits. Eventually the boy points to the woods, where his father lies injured from a fall. Without speaking, Lianjun carries the man back to the village. He refuses any reward. This is how stories of him spread, not through battle tales, but through quiet kindness. He takes notes now, more frequently. A leather-bound book carried in a pouch beside his sword. Observations about terrain, plants, sky colour, behaviour. One entry reads, "The ants here are darker than in the north. They carry together and do not fight." Another, written after a monsoon, "Rain like arrows." The men laughed as they repaired the roof. During this period, Lianjun is assigned 4 junior soldiers to train. One of them is impulsive, quick to anger, prone to boast. Lianjun doesn't scold. He walks beside the young man in silence each morning, pointing to the wind patterns, the way tree bark curls before a storm. Slowly the boy quiets. Among his few possessions, Lianjun keeps a small inkstone, a silk handkerchief from a merchant's wife who once thanked him for saving her caravan, and a carved chess piece made by a friend lost in the mountains. Each night he places these beside his sleeping mat, as though marking a border between the world of duty and the world of memory. By the year 1805, Lianjun's unit is sent north again, this time not for war but for ceremonial security. A new governor is being installed in a river city known for its bridges and winter plum blossoms. His soldiers guard the city gates, walk the stone paths beneath lanterns, and watch fireworks from rooftops. During one festival, a local child gives Lianjun a paper crane. He keeps it folded in his journal. It is during this posting that Lianjun first begins to experience the weariness of time. His joints ache in the morning. His reflexes, once as sharp as frost, now take a breath longer to catch. He trains still, but alone, often at dawn, when the city sleeps, and the fog paints every surface with softness. He begins to mentor more formally, not with rank, but with presence. Other soldiers seek him out for advice. They ask him about tactics, of course, but also about how to sleep when fear presses into the chest, or how to write a letter to a mother they haven't seen in years. Lianjun rarely gives answers. He tells stories, half-formed, gentle, guiding. In 1708, word comes of a small uprising in a distant province. Lianjun volunteers to join the reinforcement unit. He is not required to. He is offered a comfortable post elsewhere, but he insists. When asked why, he replies only, "The path does not end until it bends into the earth." The campaign is brief but hard. The rebels strike quickly, retreat into forests, burn bridges behind them. Lianjun's unit is forced to travel light, sleeping beneath trees, drinking from streams, eating whatever can be boiled or roasted. In one battle, they arrive just as the sun sets and fight into the night. Lianjun does not lead, but he directs. He sketches battle lines in the soil, notes the slope of the hill, and positions men where shadow will give them cover. The strategy works. The rebellion is crushed, but Lianjun takes no pleasure in it. In his journal he writes, "Victory is not loud. It is heavy." He returns with fewer men than he left with. One of the younger soldiers, barely 20, dies in his arms. Lianjun does not weep. He binds the boy's wounds with care, closes his eyes, and spends the entire night keeping watch over the body. At dawn, he carries the body back to camp alone. From that moment, something inside him quiets further. He speaks even less, moves even slower. His gaze, once sharp, becomes distant, not dull, but deep. But even in this grief he continues. He returns to training new recruits. He begins teaching calligraphy in the evenings, using broken roof tiles as writing surfaces. He paints not only military maxims, but poems, verses about stone bridges, drifting blossoms, and rain tapping against armour. His favourite reads, "When the wind stops, the reed remembers." This then is Lianjun at midlife, neither old nor young, neither ascending nor falling. He exists within the slow breath of empire, steady, unseen, and entirely essential. And in the next part of his story, we'll watch the final stretch of his journey, his return home, the last lessons he gives, and the legacy he never intended to leave. By 1812, the sun that once beat down on Lianjun's helmet in distant campaigns now filters gently through the leaves of old trees in his native province. He is 44, lean but weathered, his eyes no longer sharp with youth, but clear, like the surface of a quiet lake, undisturbed but deep. He walks now with a cane, not always out of necessity, but as a mark of transition. Where once his duties revolved around readiness and war, now they orbit the slow orbit of administration, education and memory. His return to the village where he was born feels less like an end and more like a slow exhale. A long-held breath finally released. The village has changed. New houses rise beside old ones. Children run where once only fields grew. The roads are better, the market more crowded, and yet the core remains. The river still winds through, murmuring the same stories. The mulberry trees still sway with seasonal rhythm. And the small family shrine, though cracked and weather-worn, still holds the same incense scent his father once tended. The garrison post here is modest, just 12 men, a half-dozen horses, and a commander who, despite his youth, respects the older man deeply. Lianjun does not issue commands, he observes. He offers suggestions in the form of stories. He stands beside younger men during drills, correcting, not with critique, but with presence. He wakes before the sun, walks the perimeter of the village, checks on the granary, sometimes helps a farmer mend a fence. He eats simply, congee in the morning, steamed greens and rice at dusk. He drinks tea with both hands, savouring the way the steam rises in the morning air. Word of his return spreads beyond the village. Other commanders send letters, requesting advice or small favours. A local magistrate visits, hoping to gain insight into troop morale. Lianjun listens more than he speaks. When asked for his opinion, he smiles gently and says, "The river does not speak, but it guides everything." He begins to write more regularly. His journal now spans multiple volumes. Some entries are simple. Rained all day. Chickens hid under cart. Young soldier limps. Tendon likely strained. Others are longer, poetic. Today, the air smelled of firewood and damp earth. I remembered the morning fog in the mountains before the battle, how it wrapped around us like sleep refusing to end. Once a week he walks to the local school, not as an official but as a guest. He sits in the corner and listens to lessons. When asked to speak, he tells stories, but not of war. He talks about how to stay calm when lost in fog, how to tell when rice is ready to harvest by listening to the bend of the stalk, how a blade should never look for violence but be ready to stop it. He teaches that honour is not found in medals, but in remembering to bow before entering someone's home. That strength is not shouting, but lifting a crying child from the ground without asking whose child it is. These stories are often met with silence, then slow nods. In 1815, a small outbreak of disease passes through the region. Nothing widespread, but enough to worry the village. Lianjun assists in organising supplies, boiling water, storing food, ensuring quarantine for those affected. He does not panic. He moves as always, slowly, deliberately, with the same gravity as a mountain cloud. That winter is cold, colder than many remember. Snow falls thick and heavy, burying paths and silencing birds. Lianjun, now nearing 50, spends most days near the garrison fire, stitching his old uniform by hand. He insists on doing it himself. Hands forget if they do not move, he tells the curious. Younger soldiers begin to emulate him. They take notes. They carve chess pieces from spare wood. They speak with more patience. One writes to his brother saying, "There is an old soldier here who drinks tea like it's a ritual. He walks like trees are watching. He has not taught me how to fight, but I think he's taught me how to live." In the spring of 1817, Lianjun plants a tree near the village edge. A peach tree. He waters it every morning. He ties a red string around its trunk, not for ceremony, but as a reminder. When asked what it reminds him of, he says, "The time I saw a man fall and no one stopped to help. I have been trying to undo that silence ever since." In 1819, an imperial envoy passes through, inspecting garrisons. Most officials make displays. Banners unfurled, troops drilled. Lianjun simply bows, offers tea, and answers questions. When the envoy departs, he leaves behind a scroll with a single phrase. Some silence is not absence. It is presence without ego. That autumn, Lianjun falls ill. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just tired. He coughs more, eats less, walks slower. He begins organising his belongings. He gives his inkstone to the young boy who brings water each day. He leaves his journal with the village teacher. He sharpens his blade one last time and buries it beneath the peach tree. He spends more time sitting, by the river, near the mulberry trees beside the family shrine. Sometimes he speaks. Sometimes he just watches. One evening during the harvest moon, he walks through the village, pausing at each door. He doesn't knock. He just looks, as if counting stories, memories, lives. Then he returns to his mat, folds his robe carefully and lies down. He doesn't rise the next morning. There is no funeral procession, just a gathering. Soldiers, villagers, children, a few strangers. Each places something by his tree. A carved token, a scrap of cloth, a single blossom. A small stone is placed at the base of the tree with no name, just the phrase, wind, river, silence. Years later, the tree blossoms every spring. Children play beneath it. Travellers rest beside it. No one teaches its meaning, but everyone seems to understand. This, then, was Lianjun, a soldier whose battles were never sung, whose victories left no monuments, but whose life, in its stillness, became a kind of quiet anthem, a song not of war, but of enduring. In the next segment, we'll shift from biography to mystery, the world of forgotten relics, buried armour, and the subtle clues that the past leaves behind. We will explore the cultural and archaeological remnants of the Qing military, not through textbook entries, but through what remains in earth, ash, and rumour. As the story of Lianjun fades gently into memory, we find ourselves drawn to what remains after such lives are lived. Not in grand tombs or royal scrolls, but in the quiet places where history leaves its fingerprints. This segment turns our gaze to those silent remnants, the faint footprints of Qing soldiers etched in the earth, whispered through artifacts, and sometimes even etched into legend. The Qing Dynasty spanned nearly 3 centuries, and during that time, its military expanded across every frontier. When the empire receded, many of its traces were absorbed into new settlements, buried beneath roads, or left to be discovered centuries later. The archaeology of the Qing military is subtle, almost bashful, not loud like the relics of empires past, but humble, practical, human. One such site lies in the hills of Shaanxi province, a small outpost, once a northern watch station, long abandoned. Unearthed decades ago, the dig revealed a series of stone foundations, charred wooden posts and ceramic fragments. Among them were small but poignant finds: a rusted spearhead, the buckle of a leather boot, a comb made of bone, and a bowl etched with a child's name. No grand treasures, but each object whispers. Imagine holding that comb, smooth from years of use, its teeth uneven from time. Was it used by a soldier before morning drill? Did he carry it in a pouch? Did he gift it to someone? These questions, though unanswerable, bring the past to life in ways textbooks cannot. At another site in Yunnan, closer to the borderlands once patrolled by elite Qing cavalry, a collapsed fort was discovered beneath a layer of forest soil. The walls, made of tightly packed earth and bamboo reinforcements, had long since given way to moss and root. But within the central hall, once the officers' quarters, were scroll fragments sealed in ceramic jars. The ink had faded, but some characters remained legible. They included duty rosters, supply lists, and a brief letter. Snow came early. Morale is low. Today we lost another to fever. We light incense. We sing a quiet song. No name was signed, but the moment survives. Elsewhere, in the deserts of Xinjiang, archaeologists found remnants of an old Qing border checkpoint. The desert had preserved much of it: a small barracks, a half-buried cache of iron arrowheads, and a fire pit lined with stones still blackened from use. Most curious was a painted tile, depicting a horse mid-gallop, with a ribbon trailing from its mane. On the back, written faintly in Manchu script, "My brother's steed. May it run forever in the next world." These small relics carry the weight of anonymous lives. They offer no grand revelations, no sweeping narratives, but they remind us that the soldier's world was not always about orders and warfare. It was about waiting, eating, remembering, losing, hoping. Museums across China quietly hold hundreds of such pieces, not behind glass lit with fanfare, but in drawers, boxes and archives. Qing-era boots stitched with reed thread, tin cups dented by age, jade charms engraved with protective sigils. Some soldiers carried small wooden tablets with verses of poetry or lines from Confucian texts. One reads, "A blade is sharpened not for war, but to protect the stillness of the field." In the palace archives, there exist military examination papers, some filled with neat script, others scratched and stained. These tests were once used to assess officer candidates. Beyond the expected questions about tactics and logistics, they often included philosophical prompts. What is the weight of command when no one watches? Or, how does silence serve the empire better than noise? Answers varied. Some were practical, others poetic. All reveal the internal landscape of men trained not only to fight, but to think, reflect, and write. Legends too surround the forgotten soldiers. In villages near the old southern front, it is said that sometimes on rainy nights, one can hear the footsteps of a lone soldier walking down the central path carrying a lantern. He never speaks, he never stops. Some say he's searching for his lost unit. Others claim he guards something hidden. Historians dismiss these as folk tales, but the stories persist, passed from grandmother to child by firelight. Sometimes history endures not in stone, but in story. In Qinghai, a mountain pass still bears the name Lantern Gate. Local elders say it was once a checkpoint manned by 5 soldiers during a blizzard. They stayed, though they had no supplies, no orders. When found, their fires were still lit. The name was never changed. What does it mean to find meaning in such fragments? Archaeology, at its most humble, is a kind of quiet listening, a willingness to sit with questions that may never be answered, to hold a boot buckle in one's hand and feel, for a moment, the echo of the foot that wore it. The Qing soldier, whether stationed at a remote outpost or walking beneath the walls of the Forbidden City, lived a life layered with motion and stillness. And in the artifacts left behind, we do not find drama, but rhythm, breath, time. There is a site in Liaoning where a section of training ground was uncovered, its packed soil still marked with indentations from repeated drills. Side by side, step after step, the rhythm remains, not metaphor but fact. Feet once fell here, again and again, until the ground itself remembered. Even in literary records, small details emerge. A scroll from 1834 recounts a garrison's final months before being reassigned. We cleaned the tiles of the gate, we painted the courtyard stones, we wrote poems on the beams so the next men would not feel alone. Those beams no longer exist, but the poem survives in transcript. Between these stones we trained and ate, and wondered at the stars too late. If you, now new, should feel dismay, just know we also knelt to pray. Such lines do not glorify war, they cradle humanity. In the Imperial War Office archives, one entry from a minor officer named Chung reads, "Our youngest recruit today asked if ghosts salute. I told him yes, and now he won't enter the temple without bowing. This is the past in its gentlest form, not weapons but worries, not conquest but connection." As we complete this segment, let us remember that the legacy of the Qing soldier is not solely in campaigns or border maps, but in the unseen, the brushstroke on a cup, the crease in a boot, the weight of a name unspoken. Next, we will transition into the contrasting worlds of soldiers and elites. What was life like in the palaces, for officers with rank, for the noble class who never walked the muddy roads? We'll explore how power looked from above, and how the soldier was viewed from the heights of silk and scroll. Segment 3. Mystery, Archaeology, Culture. As we turn now to the deeper and more mysterious corridors of Qing military life, we find ourselves navigating a blend of reality and echo. History, not as it was simply written, but as it was lived, forgotten, unearthed, and occasionally mythologized. The Qing soldier's world wasn't just shaped by orders and outposts, but also by symbols, ceremonies, secrets, and spiritual undercurrents. Let's begin with a simple object, the tally tablet. These wooden or metal tags, known as fu, were issued to soldiers for identification and clearance, like an early form of military ID. But unlike modern IDs, many were inscribed not just with names and units, but with auspicious phrases, astrological symbols, or charms intended to protect the bearer in both this life and the next. Some tablets were split in half, one side retained by the soldier, the other kept by the commanding officer or registrar. Only when both halves were matched could a soldier claim full clearance or release, a system of trust and control. In 2006, a pair of matched Fyi were uncovered during a restoration project in an old fort site in Jiangsu province. One half had been buried beneath a floorboard, the other was found in a nearby well. The inscriptions were faded but legible. Together they read, "Earth steadies, sky shelters, man obeys." No records remain of the soldier they belonged to, but for a moment, his presence returns. Throughout the Qing Empire, especially in remote regions, soldiers often blended formal military protocol with local beliefs. In the jungles of the south, some units burned incense before patrols, not mandated but passed down from the locals, who believed it warded off malevolent forest spirits. In the dry north, water was sprinkled on horses' brows before travel, to prevent bad luck. Superstition and strategy entwined. One of the most curious archaeological finds related to the Qing military came not from a battlefield, but from beneath a collapsed ancestral hall near Nanchang. Inside a concealed compartment were dozens of tiny wooden dolls, each carved with a soldier's name and birth sign. Some were painted with expressions of pain or rage. Scholars speculate they were used in ritual curses or protective rites, perhaps commissioned by families to shield loved ones during war. While officially frowned upon by Confucian scholars and court officials, these beliefs persisted. Military life was dangerous and uncertain. Soldiers needed anchors, and in the absence of guarantees they turned to talismans, dreams, and whispered rites passed down from elder to recruit. Even language held power. The character for soldier, *Bing*, Bing, was used cautiously in some households. In certain regions it was considered unlucky to say aloud before sunrise. Instead, euphemisms like Iron Walker or Sky's Hand were used. Manchu banners, with their strict codes, often held internal rituals invisible to outsiders. Promotion ceremonies sometimes involved fasting, quiet meditation, and offerings to ancestors. A general might consult the I Ching, the Book of Changes, before deploying troops, not as state policy, but as personal reassurance. One recovered document from a Manchu officer's private archive details a dream he had before a battle. I stood on a field of mirrors. My reflection wept, but my hands were dry. The wind said nothing. I woke certain we would not return. We did, but not whole. These introspections reveal a world of emotional complexity, far from the stereotype of hardened stoicism. Soldiers were often deeply reflective, attuned to patterns, omens, and memory. Their culture was one of rhythm, ritual, and restraint. Qing military culture also shaped, and was shaped by, the arts. Soldiers sang, not loudly, not always in unison, but quietly, especially on long marches or at night. These were not battle chants, but melodic murmurs, lullabies, laments, verses taught by mothers and comrades. Some songs survive today in folk traditions, their origins obscured but their tone unmistakably martial. One melody, known in some mountain villages as Lantern Path, is said to have been composed by Qing scouts marching in the southwest. It speaks of flickering lights in the distance, the ache of tired feet, and the quiet hope of returning home. Transcribed later by ethnomusicologists, the lyrics include, "Hold the light low, let the wind choose, if we must walk, let it be toward dawn." In museums, we find scrolls with ink paintings attributed to soldiers, landscapes seen on patrol, battlefields imagined in dreamlike abstraction, or delicate renderings of their favourite trees or animals. Some were signed with names, others only marked with symbols or a fingerprint. An especially haunting piece, now held in a provincial collection in Anhui, shows a circle of tents drawn in precise symmetry. Above each tent a ghostly silhouette floats, men made of smoke or mist. The caption, faded but preserved, reads simply, "Those who remain." Cultural practices also defined military attire. While uniforms were regulated, soldiers often personalised their undergarments with embroidered phrases or stitched charms. One soldier's undershirt, discovered in a tomb, bore the characters, "One day more, one step home." Armour, too, held meaning. Beyond protection, it symbolised rank, lineage, and identity. Qing armour varied by unit and era. Some featured lamella plates laced with silk cords, others bore dragons, tigers, or phoenixes. Some bore no decoration at all, their plainness a kind of humility. It was common for soldiers to etch words or names onto the inside of helmets, messages to family, lines of poetry. In one recovered helmet, the inscription reads, "When the sky cries, hold your breath." These fragments, physical and cultural, add dimension to our understanding. They remind us that military life wasn't just about discipline, but about the human need to make meaning, to cope, to remember, to feel seen. Even food carried layers of tradition. In some garrisons, special soups were brewed before campaign season, full of garlic, ginger and pepper, meant to heat the blood and chase cold from the bones. Recipes were passed down with minor changes across generations. Some included dried mushrooms, rare mountain herbs, or even fermented tofu for strength. During Lunar New Year, soldiers far from home might hang strips of red paper near their bunks, some with characters written in reverse for luck. Even without their families, they reenacted rituals with discipline, as though doing so tied them invisibly to loved ones. In this way, military life became a blend of outer structure and inner culture, a bridge between empire and personal survival, and just as much was left unsaid. Whispers of silent campaigns persist in folklore, small skirmishes or operations never recorded officially. Some say these were missions deemed too disgraceful or secretive to mention. Others argue they were inventions, dreams that history forgot. One story tells of an entire unit sent to a high mountain to retrieve a sacred banner stolen during a rebellion. None returned. But decades later, a shepherd found a silk scrap fluttering from a tree, the same colour, the same weave. He brought it to the village elder, who burned it in silence. Fact or fiction, these tales illustrate something deeper, that mystery is part of memory. That absence can be as telling as presence, that sometimes what we cannot prove becomes what we most remember. And so, the Qing soldiers' world, beneath the banners, beyond the barracks, unfolds not just in timelines and treaties, but in the hush of belief, the rhythm of steps, and the echo of songs once sung beneath foreign stars. Next, we'll climb into the halls of power. The elite, the privileged, the officers and nobles who saw military life from balconies and scrolls. What was their world like? And how did they see, or fail to see, the men who walk the roads below? Let us remain for a while longer in the quiet corridors of Qing military mystery, in the narrow space between fact and folklore, where culture lingers in fragments and truths hide inside symbols. In the Imperial Library of the Forbidden City, an aged scroll rests within the guarded archives. Written in careful brushwork by an anonymous court historian during the reign of the Qianlong Emperor, it catalogues not wars, but omens. It documents dozens of events that were believed to foreshadow trouble within the ranks. A bird nesting inside a drum, boots found floating in a river, shadows reported walking counter to the sun. Each incident is recorded with location, time, and response. One entry reads, "In the northern camp near Yumen Pass, soldiers report dreams of falling stars for 9 nights. Commander ordered fasting and cleansing. Peace returned." Whether these entries were taken seriously or simply archived as curiosities is unclear. But the fact they were written down at all suggests something about the inner climate of military life. Discipline alone did not govern the Qing soldier. There was room for the irrational, the sacred, the strange. This spiritual elasticity extended to certain burial practices as well. In some regions, soldiers who died far from home were buried with clay tokens, small discs inscribed with their name, birth animal, and a poem. The idea was that these markers could one day guide the soul back to familiar ground. At a dig near Dali, archaeologists uncovered one such token. It read, "If my bones rest where rain sings strange, let this name drift north with smoke." Found beside it was a blade broken at the hilt and a handful of river stones. Sometimes it wasn't death that left marks, but fear. During an excavation of a Qing-era hilltop fortification in Guangxi, a series of symbols were found etched into the inside of the walls. Not decorative, functional, perhaps even desperate. Protective glyphs, known to folk shamans and village healers. Wards against illness, betrayal, bad weather. Soldiers had scratched them with knives, ink or soot, layering over each other like graffiti. The fort's records listed no battles, but something lingered. Another tale, preserved not in record, but in the oral tradition of a family in Fujian, tells of a soldier who, during an expedition into unfamiliar territory, began to record birdsong every morning. He created a code out of it, believing the birds were messengers. He trained his unit to listen for certain rhythms. 3 calls, a pause, 1 call, danger, he reportedly said. While such behaviour might seem eccentric, it's worth noting that some Qing officers did include natural observation in their strategic planning. The flow of water, the nesting of birds, the condition of moss on stones, all could be indicators of movement, moisture, or hidden presence. Culture was not separate from warfare, it was folded within it. Let us step now into a more formal cultural domain, the ceremonial. When a new banner division was established or restructured, it was often blessed with a ritual. Official records speak only of formations, decrees, and rosters. But scattered diaries from mid-level officers suggest deeper layers, an altar of soil and water, the placement of a pine bough beneath the regimental drum, a bowl of rice offered at dawn. Symbols mattered. A general once refused to move his command camp until a crooked tree was removed from the northern edge, not for tactical reason, but because it bent toward the past. Another insisted on painting the inside of his tent blue to calm dreams. At the edge of one soldier's notebook, tattered manuscript with ink stains and burn marks, is a line scrawled in haste. The map forgot the well. No explanation follows. It might have been a literal note, a mental nudge, or it might be a metaphor, rich with meaning. Even when all paths are charted, something essential is often missed. Even in training, rituals endured. In some elite Manchu cavalry units, the first arrow shot during morning practice was accompanied by a quiet exhale and a bow toward the east, a habit said to align strength with the direction of renewal. In others, recruits were made to spend 1 hour per day in silence, simply cleaning and organising, not as punishment, but as reflection. One officer wrote, "A silent hand sweeps more than dust. It moves what cannot be named." These acts weren't always state-sanctioned, but they existed, repeated, passed down. Another mysterious aspect of Qing military culture is the hidden art of coded stitching. Uniforms had regulations, but inside linings, particularly in jackets and hats, sometimes bore patterns of thread that functioned as identifiers, prayers, or messages. A soldier might wear a pattern sewn by his mother, a secret message embedded within the seams. One lining, preserved in a museum in Hunan, includes the following stitched in minuscule Manchu script: "Even if the sky falls, I will stand where you placed me." This blending of textile and text is deeply telling. It speaks to a world where emotion, obligation, and identity were layered physically into the fabric of daily life. And then there are the ghost drills. In certain regions, old-timers spoke of silent drills carried out under moonlight, with no sounds allowed. Soldiers moved in coordinated patterns, responding to gestures alone. The drill served practical purposes: stealth, cohesion, reflex, but they also bordered on ritual. At the end of each silent drill, a single line was spoken in unison: "Let no echo remain." No explanation is recorded, but such practices likely helped foster not only precision, but a shared sense of mystery, a reminder that their duty was not just mechanical, but also psychological, even metaphysical. The more we explore, the more we realise. The Qing military wasn't merely an instrument of power, it was a culture within a culture, a body with its own nervous system, dreams, scars, and soul. The final example comes from a minor poet-scribe named Ren Yao, who travelled with logistics divisions during the Daoguang Emperor's reign. In one of his preserved journals he writes, "I followed behind 30 carts of grain, and 30 carts followed behind me. We passed a shrine, silent and cracked. One soldier bowed, though no one ordered it. Later we saw an owl in daylight, and all fell silent. That night he wrote a letter to no one." This detail, a letter to no one, perhaps encapsulates the paradox of Qing military life. Much was done that had no audience. Much was felt that had no name. Much was remembered only by those who did not speak of it. And in this silence, we begin to understand. Next, we will ascend into the world of the elite, the halls of command, the robes of privilege, the contrast between those who served and those who strategized. We'll step into the view from above and see how soldiers like Lian Jun were seen, or unseen, by those who wore silk and held scrolls. Before we ascend to the heights of privilege, let us pause here for one final moment in the in-between, that liminal space between history and humanity, where mystery lingers like the last breath of incense in a closed room. There is a story, spoken softly among archivists, of a scroll that once resided deep within the Qianlong Emperor's private collection, not catalogued among the war records, but tucked into a section of observations and curiosities. The scroll was said to be a transcription of a soldier's dream, dictated to a court scribe after a routine ceremonial audience. In the dream, the soldier walked a road of banners. Each banner bore the name of someone he'd never met. At the end of the road, a gate made of silence stood open. Beyond it, nothing, just wind. The emperor, the story says, read the dream twice and then ordered it sealed. Whether it ever existed remains unknown, but the tale reveals much. The Qing military did not operate in isolation. It mirrored, absorbed, and sometimes challenged the greater cultural landscape of its time. Its soldiers were not cogs in a machine. They were vessels, of discipline, yes, but also of grief, belief, and enduring questions. One final exploration into these layered mysteries brings us to the practice of ink-paint correspondence, a hybrid between letter and painting sent between soldiers and their families or comrades. These were not official documents. They were private, expressive, often filled with symbols. A sparrow might represent a memory. A crumbling tower might indicate vulnerability. In one recovered piece, found in a sealed ceramic pot in Guizhou, a soldier painted a riverbank with a single footprint at the edge. Alongside it, a few characters, I stood here until the moon wept. Scholars have long debated the exact meaning, but perhaps it is not to be solved. Perhaps it is to be held, like a folded paper bird, delicate and silent. Cultural folklore often framed Qing soldiers as liminal figures, half tethered to the empire, half to the unknown. In plays performed during ghost festivals, the character of the Lost Bannerman appears. He is dressed in armour with no insignia, speaks in riddles, and is searching not for enemies, but for something he lost in a dream. These performances weren't official history, but they were cultural memory. They helped society process the burden of endless campaigns and faraway deaths. Children knew of the silent rider, who rode a pale horse and could not speak until the right question was asked. And questions mattered. Qing soldiers often asked questions in their writing, not for answers, but as reflection. A soldier's diary from 1829 ends with a page of them. Is it still a path if no one returns? Do lanterns burn for the lost, or for those waiting? If duty becomes silence, what remains? These are not the inquiries of war. They are the contemplations of men who walk the spaces between battles, and in their wandering we hear something rare, the voice of humility within power. Even their absence became meaningful. In a ruined outpost near the Great Wall, a stone slab was found with only this inscription: "The fire was kept." That is enough. Not who, not how. Just the acknowledgement that something essential endured. And sometimes the relics left behind seem to speak not to us, but to each other. In one museum collection, two unrelated artefacts sit quietly on different shelves. A bowl carved with the phrase, "I wait for spring," and a lantern with, "Let it be warm enough to return." Different materials, different regions. But the sentiment echoes. In an age of formal hierarchy and rigid structure, these fragments of tenderness, these glimpses of emotional complexity, challenged the assumption that the military world was only cold, mechanical, or monolithic. It was at times deeply human and hauntingly aware of its own ephemerality. And this brings us to the final bridge of this segment, the spiritual lives of soldiers. Spirituality in Qing military life was rarely doctrinal. It was lived. Small acts, private beliefs, portable rituals. Some soldiers carried small wooden icons, not always of Buddhist or Taoist origin, but of local deities, ancestor representations, or even fictional protectors. One soldier in the western regions carved a figure with 3 eyes and 4 hands, said to be inspired by a dream. He named it the Watcher of Smoke. Others kept dream journals. Some spoke of recurring visions, a fox sitting at a gate, a single boat drifting upstream, a child made of snow. These weren't shared widely, but they were recorded, buried, or passed along. During deployments, a common tradition was to create a prayer circle before crossing dangerous terrain. Soldiers would place stones in a ring, sit in silence for a few breaths, and then move on. Some officers allowed it, others ignored it. But the practice spread quietly. Music also played a spiritual role. Not drums of war, but quiet tunes played on flutes, mouth organs, or simple string instruments. One tune, known among field medics as Sleeping Water, was believed to calm those with fever. Another, called 10,000 Leaves, was played at sunset. Songs lingered long after soldiers were gone. Villagers in the hills of Hubei still sing a tune believed to originate from Qing soldiers returning home from the Southwest Front. It speaks not of glory, but of simple yearning. Step soft, heart stay river still, mind stray when gates are near, remember clay. Even the written language of the era reveals nuance. The character for guard, or shu, includes both roof and hand, a quiet holding, a careful presence, not an attack, not dominance, a watchful stillness. And this stillness defines the deepest mystery of the Qing soldier's life, not in what he did, but how he remained, not in conquest, but in the space he left behind, a room swept, a fire tended, a gate repaired. This, in the end, is perhaps the greatest mystery of all, that history, for all its noise and motion, is ultimately carried by those who move quietly through it. And now, with all of this beneath us, the daily rhythms, the personal journey, the mysteries and fragments, we rise. Next, we step into the courts, the mansions, the golden chambers, into the contrast, into the world of officers, nobles, and the powerful few who commanded from above. What did they see, and what, despite all their vision, did they miss? Now, with the ground beneath our feet rich in memories, and the campfires of quiet soldiers behind us, we turn our gaze upward, toward the towers, the carved beams, the walls of silk that framed a different world. The Qing military was not a monolith. It was a structure, tiered and stratified, and at its uppermost levels sat the elites, generals, high officers, strategists, and those whose ties to the imperial court gave them power not earned through drills or dust, but through lineage, favour, and scroll. Their world was not one of shared bunks and cracked boots. It was a world of lacquered halls, scroll-covered desks, and morning audiences in robes heavy with rank. These men held titles like Grand Minister of War, Commander of the Left Banner, or Inspector of Frontier Deployment. They lived behind walls of carved stone, slept beneath embroidered ceilings, and received reports on silk, not paper. Imagine the scene. A courtyard garden in Beijing where plum blossoms fall on stone tiles as a general reads dispatches over tea. His armour, ceremonial and polished, hangs in a display room. His sword is sheathed, not at his side, but behind glass. The battles he discusses are lines on a map, distant, symbolic. The men he commands exist in rows of characters, not in the calloused reality of sweat and weather. This is not to say that high officers were disconnected. Some were veterans, men who had seen campaigns and bled in the mud. Others were scholars elevated through examination. But all operated within a structure where decorum, diplomacy and court politics often mattered as much, or more, than experience in the field. The court maintained a strict hierarchy. Promotion within the military ranks was not only about merit. It involved balance, between Manchu and Han officers, between the Eight Banners and the Green Standard Army, between aristocratic privilege and bureaucratic favour. At court, the language of command was refined, almost poetic. A directive might read, "Let strength be applied where the land stiffens, and leniency bloom where the wind bends." Orders couched in metaphor, strategy wrapped in civility, and with rank came spectacle. The military parades of the Qing capital were not exercises of readiness, but performances of power. Officers wore robes embroidered with cranes or tigers. Marching bands filled the streets with gongs and horns. Soldiers, often rotated for appearance, carried gleaming weapons, their movements choreographed to impress the emperor, visiting envoys or high officials. Inside the Forbidden City, the emperor might consult with his generals over scrolls so large they required multiple attendants to unroll. These meetings were part ritual, part strategy, and entirely theatrical. The contrast to life in the field could not have been sharper. In memoirs left behind by a retired inspector named Zheng Luhai, we read, "I once visited a barracks in Hunan and saw a soldier boiling his own boots to soften them. He saluted me with a hand wrapped in linen. That same evening I attended a banquet where the general's dogs were fed from silver bowls. I could not eat." Such dissonance was not uncommon. Among some elite officers, there was genuine awareness of this divide. A few tried to bridge it, by advocating for better supplies, by visiting outposts personally, by writing letters in support of wounded men. But the system itself was vast and resistant. The emperor's role in military life was equally layered. In theory, the Son of Heaven was supreme commander. In practice, most tactical decisions were delegated, but symbolism mattered. The emperor reviewed troops, accepted reports, and bestowed honours, always with great ceremony. During the reign of the Qianlong emperor, military campaigns were often immortalised in massive hand scrolls, painted by court artists. These scrolls showed rows of perfect formations, brave charges, enemy defeats, all in idealised form. Real soldiers, with their injuries and doubts, were replaced by figures of triumph. Yet, even within the court, voices occasionally rose to speak of the gap. A minor official once wrote, "Victory should be measured not by ground gained, but by how many returned whole." The document was quietly archived. In the homes of nobles and high-ranking generals, military life was romanticised. Paintings of famous battles hung beside ancestral portraits. Poetry composed by untested commanders spoke of wind, steel and honour, while the men in their command struggled with rations. At court banquets, stories of the frontier were shared as amusements. The term heroic hardship became a phrase, used not to describe suffering, but to decorate conversation. This duality extended into fashion. While soldiers wore standard-issue tunics, officers had access to ceremonial armour, often lacquered wood or tin designed for visual splendour. Some never saw real use. Helmets were engraved with mythic beasts. Breastplates bore stylized dragons. These were less about protection and more about presence. And yet, behind the silken scrolls, some elite commanders carried a quiet burden, the knowledge that their signatures could send hundreds into danger. Some wrote poems in private, full of doubt. One reads, "A mark on paper, 1,000 paths. I do not walk, but they do. May the ink dry slowly for their sake." In the imperial court, portraits of famous generals hung in the Hall of Military Glory, each face captured in idealized brushwork, each man posed in strength, but among them, not one painting showed weariness, not one depicted loss. This curated image was intentional. The Qing elite needed the soldier to be symbol, strength, loyalty, endurance, because the empire itself depended on that image. But symbols do not sweat, they do not mourn, they do not hesitate before stepping into frost. And so, while the elites managed the machinery of power, a quiet tension remained between the appearance of control and the reality of cost. In the library of a retired general, a book was found with handwritten annotations in the margins. One reads, "Maps do not show tired eyes. Orders do not feel cold wind." The Qing military elite lived in privilege, but they were not always blind. The best among them felt the weight. The worst ignored it. Most simply adapted, balancing duty with distance. Some commissioned songs to honour their troops. Others used soldiers' stories as inspiration for plays or novels. A few visited the wounded, but for the most part the everyday soldier remained a distant presence, honoured in speech, forgotten in policy. Still, even in the highest chambers the footsteps of those below could sometimes be heard, faint but unmistakable. And now we step toward that sound. We descend again from the palace gates to the crossroad villages, the muddy hills, the tea-houses where rumours brewed, and the homes where families waited. In the next segment, we will trace that contrast fully, the interplay between the soldier and the society he served. How was he seen? How did others live beside, beneath or beyond the uniform? What was it like to be a mother, a friend, a stranger watching a Qing soldier pass by on the road? This is the final arc, the social layer where duty and daily life meet, and where the full weight of the uniform is truly revealed. Segment 4. Social, elite, contrasting daily life. As we descend now from palaces and polished scrolls, we return to the earth, to the dusty streets of towns, the thatched roofs of farms, the riverside tea stalls where labourers rest and stories are told. Here, in the shadow of the banners, lived the people who watched the soldiers pass by. Mothers, children, farmers, shopkeepers, officials, widows, lovers. The Qing soldier, while bound to his duty, was also a figure deeply embedded in the social landscape. He was seen, sometimes with awe, sometimes with fear, sometimes with indifference. His presence marked moments of protection, uncertainty, or change. And how he was seen depended on where he walked, what he wore, and what the people around him expected. Let's begin in a small village in Jiangnan, one of thousands dotting the green southern countryside. Here, the arrival of a soldier could mean many things. If he came alone, with a letter and a satchel, perhaps he was returning home. If he came in a group, in formation, perhaps there was an imperial order. If he rode ahead of a banner, villagers might stop what they were doing, bow slightly and wait. But most of the time, it was more subtle. A soldier might stop for water at a well, sit under a tree with a bowl of rice, or quietly mend a sandal near the village square. In such moments, the uniform became a bridge, a mark of distance but also of shared humanity. Children often stared, some curious, some shy. Occasionally, one would ask a question. "Do you fight tigers?" Or, "Have you seen the emperor?" The soldier might smile, might say nothing, might offer a piece of dried plum or show a trinket from a far-off province. Elders had more mixed feelings. Some respected the uniform, having once worn it themselves or known someone who had. Others saw it as a symbol of disruption, of sons taken, of taxes collected, of edicts enforced. For families who had sent someone to serve, the soldier was personal. His absence was marked in every meal, every festival. A place at the table remained empty. A garment was folded but unworn. News from the front was scarce, and when it came through rumour or official notice, or not at all. Widows of soldiers were both honoured and pitied. Some received modest stipends, others struggled in silence. A few kept their husband's blade above the door wrapped in cloth as both memorial and ward. In towns, soldiers had a different place. They were both guardians and guests. Local merchants might offer them tea or shelter, but always with formality. A soldier carried state power. Even a lone infantryman could in theory invoke the law. And yet many were humble, worn down by travel and grateful for civility. Markets were places of mingling. A soldier might trade coins for dumplings, browse fabric, or purchase ink and brushes. In such spaces his presence became ordinary, part of the rhythm. But in certain seasons tension could rise. During times of rebellion, rumour or conscription drives, soldiers became reminders of fear. A patrol moving through a restless province might be met with closed doors and silent stares. A knock at midnight might mean a summons. A posted notice might mean departure. One village elder once said, "When a soldier comes quietly, he brings peace. When he comes loudly, he carries goodbye." There were also relationships, fleeting, tender, complex. A soldier might spend months in a garrison near a city. He might visit the same tea house, speak with the same vendor, share glances with the same girl walking home each day. Some wrote letters. Some exchanged small gifts, hairpins, carved beads, pressed flowers. Rarely did these relationships end in marriage. Soldiers moved too often, and the social gap could be wide, but their imprint lingered. A daughter might keep a ribbon given by a soldier who once stopped to fix her wheelbarrow. A mother might light incense for a son who served and never returned, whispering his name before dawn. A friend might retell the story of a soldier who once helped dig a well during drought years ago. The soldier's life, though lived within barracks and boundaries, touched countless others, and in this touch, both warmth and distance were felt. Among the elite, perceptions varied again. Landowners often viewed soldiers with cautious respect. They appreciated protection, but feared the unpredictability of armed men without strong leadership. Scholars sometimes dismissed the military as crude, placing more value on civil service, poetry, and examination. Yet, paradoxically, some admired the ideal of the warrior, stoic, loyal, restrained. Classical tales of righteous generals and faithful warriors were taught in schools. Plays dramatized campaigns with exaggerated honor and sorrow. Children acted out battles in courtyards with sticks and string. In poetry, the soldier was a figure of both tragedy and valor. He walks a road with no return, his breath the empire's borrowed flame, his name inked once, then swept away beneath a sky too wide to claim. Not all soldiers fit this image, but the image endured. Within the army itself, internal social contrasts also existed. Manchu soldiers, often of higher status, received better pay, housing and recognition than their Han counterparts. This divide bred quiet tension. In joint units, camaraderie existed, but so did hierarchy. Even among Han soldiers there were distinctions. Some came from military families, respected and networked. Others were conscripts, labourers pulled from villages, trained quickly, sent far. These men often bore the hardest loads, received the fewest honours, and returned the least. In the southern provinces, travelling bards sang of such men. He wore no name upon his chest, no scroll announced his fate, but in the storm he stood alone and left his footprints at the gate. These songs circulated in tea-houses, on festival nights, or by firesides. They were not official histories, but they carried truth. Among merchants, the soldier was a customer. Among monks, a soul. Among farmers, a warning or a helper, depending on the season. Among children, a story. One account from a merchant in Suzhou reads, "He came in tired, asked for rice, paid double, and left a stone on the table. I still keep the stone." Simple acts became memory, and in the spaces where soldiers did not walk, in remote villages or cloistered gardens of nobility, their absence was also a presence. People wondered where they were, what they saw, what they endured. Some romanticised, others criticised. But few were indifferent. As wars rose and fell, As borders shifted and emperors passed, the Qing soldier remained a steady figure. Not always visible, not always spoken of, but always present. In the next part, we will explore how soldiers were remembered, in funerals, in legends, in shrines, and in silence. What legacy did they leave behind in the minds of those they served and those who followed? The social memory of a soldier is often quieter than the sound of his steps, but it lasts longer. Now that we've walked the quiet paths and bustling streets where soldiers lived among civilians, we step into the space they leave behind. A space shaped not by command or formation, but by memory. For every Qing soldier who returned, there were others who did not. Their absence became part of the landscape, not always marked by stone or ceremony, but felt in meals cooked for one too many, beds that stayed cold, and letters left unanswered. How, then, were these soldiers remembered? In formal contexts, remembrance took the shape of ancestral tablets, name inscriptions, and temple dedications. In some towns, shrines to local heroes were erected. These shrines were modest: wooden beams, a tiled roof, incense bowls, and plaques listing names. The air inside carried a scent of dust and devotion. A scroll might hang from the rafters, ink faded with time. Here rest those who walk the road, so others could remain. But such tributes were rare. Most soldiers passed anonymously, their graves unmarked, their names known only to their families. In some villages, families created home altars, small spaces with portraits, blades wrapped in cloth, or pieces of uniform carefully folded. During festivals like Qingming, these altars were cleaned and incense was lit. A bowl of rice, a cup of wine, a few spoken words. Your duty is done. You're remembered. Some traditions involve planting trees in memory, peach, willow, or pine, chosen for qualities like endurance or renewal. One tree in Anhui, nearly 200 years old, bears a carving still visible, a name, followed by a single character meaning wait. Children played under that tree, unaware of its roots in remembrance. Legends emerged too, some rooted in truth, others in the need to explain the unexplainable. A tale from Hunan tells of a soldier who died saving a town during a flash flood. His body was never recovered, but each spring a white bird appears at the river bend, circling once before flying north. Elders say it's him, checking that all is well. Such stories blend reverence with imagination, shaping soldiers not only as protectors, but as part of the natural and spiritual order. Folk songs helped preserve memory. One tune, sung during autumn harvests, speaks of a soldier who left during drought and returned after the rains. He brings no spoils, only seed. The chorus says, "March slow, heart strong, the wind knows who you are." These songs were sung not just to honour, but to endure, to remind those who waited that their patience had meaning. Memory also lived in objects: a comb carved by a father, carried by his daughter, a belt buckle passed from brother to brother, a scrap of uniform sewn into a quilt. These items were not placed in museums. They lived in drawers, closets, under floorboards, pieces of presence in a world shaped by absence. Women especially were the keepers of these memories. Mothers told stories of their sons' kindness. Wives recalled the way their husbands tied their boots. Sisters recited poems they had once heard, over and over. One widow in Guangdong kept a journal for 10 years after her husband's death. Each page began the same. Today was quiet. Would you have liked the rain? When she passed, the journal was buried with her, not because it was official, but because it mattered. And sometimes memory persisted through rituals of return. A family might leave a lantern on a distant hill each new year, lighting the way for spirits. If no soldier returned, the light remained, a signal across generations. In more urban regions, official remembrance was more structured. Names recorded in registry books. Cemeteries with markers, sometimes maintained by the state. But even here, bureaucracy did not capture the whole. An archivist in Nanjing once noted, "We keep names, but not the sound of their laugh, not how they held chopsticks, not the way they stood when hearing home." It is this kind of remembrance, intimate, incomplete, but deeply felt, that defines the Qing soldiers' legacy. Their stories also survived through art. Woodblock prints occasionally depicted moments of battlefield valour, not many, but enough to suggest that for some, the soldier was more than a shadow. One series of prints from the early 1800s shows a soldier kneeling to offer water to an old man, standing guard at a village gate, or walking alone across a snowy plain. Each image carries quiet dignity. No banners, no fanfare, just presence. In literature, soldiers appeared most often as minor characters. The loyal guard, the tragic casualty, the distant protector. But in local lore, they became more: a protector of springs, a ghost who warns of storms, a man who never aged, waiting still at the edge of the forest. These myths, though romanticised, underscore something real: the impact of service, the weight of presence, the longing that lingers when someone who once walked beside you no longer does. Within the army itself, remembrance took many forms. Units kept logs of the fallen, not always detailed, sometimes just names. But when read aloud during end-of-year rites, they carried power. One entry reads, "Joe Wen, quiet, steady, always first to rise, last seen near river path." Such fragments are all that remain of entire lives, yet in their simplicity they shine. Among soldiers, memory was also kept in silence, in the way older men cleaned weapons with unusual care, in the way they tied knots the same way a lost comrade once had, in the stories they told only when drunk, and only once. One captain reportedly kept a stone in his boot, uncomfortable, unnecessary, because it reminded him of a friend who did the same, who never returned. No one questioned it. Some memories were never spoken. A soldier might carry grief like a second uniform, worn but invisible. His glance, his hesitation, his stillness at dusk. And still, they endured. Not as heroes in poems, but as men in memory. Their true legacy was not only in walls defended or roads secured, it was in the way their absence was felt, in markets, fields, temples, kitchens. In the next segment we begin to gather these threads, to gently close the journey, to reflect on all that we've seen, imagined and felt, and to consider what the Qing soldier leaves behind, not only in history, but in the quiet echo that lingers when the story ends. The conclusion waits just ahead. But first, let's sit a moment longer in the stillness, where memory rests. Let us sit now with the quiet that remains, not the silence of absence, but the settled hush that lingers when a long story draws near its close. In this final portion of our segment on social and elite life, we hold space for reflection. We look not forward nor back, but inward, at the lasting imprint left by Qing soldiers upon their world and upon the collective mind of the society they guarded, passed through, and belonged to. Because even as banners faded and dynasties changed, the image of the Qing soldier endured, not always as a symbol of might, but often as a quiet fixture of stability, a known presence, a rhythm. In communities where soldiers lived or once passed, their traces remained in customs, language, and even in the pacing of the day. Some villages held annual rites long after garrisons disbanded, burning incense at old posts, offering tea to an empty bench, sweeping the gate path where soldiers once stood watch. In the architecture of some towns you can still see traces: a narrow road that widens near a square once used for drills, a gatehouse that seems oddly tall for the small village it shadows, a stone platform that served no purpose, except perhaps for reading proclamations or watching the horizon. And in family traditions, memories lasted. One family in Sichuan tells of an ancestor who served along the Yunnan border. Every spring his descendants place 3 cups on the table before their meal, one for themselves, one for their guests, and one for him. The third is not touched, but it is never absent. Such practices are not about formality, they are about continuity, the recognition that some presences never fully depart. In regional dialects, traces remain too. In one Hubei village, the term for someone reliable is iron hand, a phrase said to originate from a soldier who once repaired a collapsed roof without being asked. In a coastal town, a certain type of scarf knot is called the marcher's twist, because it was favoured by soldiers heading inland. Folk theatre plays kept stories alive as well. The travelling troops who performed in temple courtyards or town markets often told tales of brave soldiers, but also humorous ones, tragic ones, even philosophical ones. One play, still occasionally performed in rural Anhui, tells the story of a retired soldier who becomes a village teacher. His lessons are strange, using drills to teach math, silence to teach writing, and walking long distances to teach history. The children hate him, then love him, then mourn him. The audience knows from the beginning how it ends, but they still watch. Because it's not about suspense, it's about return. Return was a central theme in how Qing soldiers were remembered socially. Not just whether they came back, but how they did, or didn't. Those who returned with stories were often invited to speak during festival gatherings. They stood by fires or inside ancestral halls and recounted what they had seen, sometimes plainly, sometimes cryptically, some embellished, others underplayed. A former garrison cook once said, "I held more rice than sword, but I saw hunger march farther than banners." Another soldier, when asked about war, only replied, "I remember the sky," not the fighting. For every tale of valour there were many of survival, of waiting, of losing and living through the loss. Villages often kept track of time using soldiers' departures and returns. That was the spring after Liang left, they might say. Or, she married the year Fan came home. Some names became seasonal landmarks. Socially, the soldier's return created both joy and tension. He had changed. The world had not. Some adapted quickly, becoming farmers, guards, or local officials. Others wandered, unable to settle. One man returned and opened a tea stall, but never spoke above a whisper. Another took up carpentry, carving gates and doors with images of clouds and footsteps. Their reintegration was often quiet, but not without ripple. Young men listened more closely to those who had served. Parents grieved with both pride and pain. Communities shifted slightly to make room, not always visibly but perceptibly. Even within religious life, soldiers had a presence. Temples often featured small statues or offerings for those who stood in the rain. Some burned incense beside shrines not dedicated to gods, but to virtues: loyalty, endurance, restraint. The names of virtues could mean more than names of people. In poetry, this perspective deepened. A scholar once wrote, "He wore the wind as cloak, carried the sky in stride. His weapon was not his blade, but the patience to wait, then walk." Another wrote simply, "3 steps in dust, 1 breath of home." These lines were copied into schoolbooks, carved into fan handles, or recited beside lantern light. Even among those who never served, the soldier's life became metaphor. A merchant enduring hardship might be called marching. A widow raising children alone might be said to carry the banner. Language bent around their image. But what of those who opposed them? Those who resisted military presence, questioned authority, or bore wounds inflicted by power. Their stories mattered too. Some remembered soldiers as enforcers, bearers of taxes, of law, of punishment. In regions with history of rebellion, the uniform could mean fear, not safety. In such places, songs were sadder, memories sharper, yet even in bitterness, complexity remained. One rebel-turned-farmer reportedly said, "He held the spear, I held the hoe. Different hands, same hunger." In this, we see the humanity of the soldier not erased by contradiction, but clarified by it. And then there are the dreams. Many elderly across the provinces told stories of dreaming of soldiers, not as ghosts, but as memories with form. A man appearing in a doorway, a boot print on fresh soil, a hand offering tea. Dreams not of the dead, but of those who once passed through, quietly marking the soul's walls. In some families, children grew up knowing stories of soldiers as part of their bedtime lore. Not dragons, not immortals, but men who marched, who sang, who cried without sound. And in this way, the soldier remained present, not through power, but through passage. Not in command, but in memory. This social contrast between elite and common, between battlefield and home, completes the fuller portrait. The Qing soldier did not stand alone in the annals of war. He lived among others, loved, feared, remembered. As we prepare to move into the final segment, the closing chapter of this long, soft exploration, we do not need fanfare, just breathe, just space. The soldier now steps back into the hush, but the world around him keeps walking, on the same roads he once watched, beneath the same sky he once served. Soon we will reflect, we will rest, and we will allow the echoes of history to settle softly around us. Segment 5, Legacy and Reflection. Now we begin the final arc, the quiet descent into legacy, where the rhythmic footsteps of the Qing soldier fade into history's soil, yet continue to shape the terrain we walk today. It's here, in this fifth segment, that all we've explored gently begins to settle. The daily life, the life of Lianjun, the mysterious rituals and cultural threads, and the societal mirror through which the soldier was seen. Now we consider what remains, not as relics or ruins, but as reflections of empire, of endurance, and of human continuity. To speak of the legacy of the Qing soldier is to speak of persistence. He did not vanish when the banners fell. His rhythm endured in practice, posture, and protocol, in the slow evolution of modern armies, in the civic expectations placed upon men in uniform, and in the inherited memories of discipline and service that echo in homes, towns, and institutions long after his watch has ended. The fall of the Qing Dynasty in 1912 was not an abrupt erasure. It was a turning, one slow enough for tradition to stretch, to ripple forward, to plant itself in new soil. Many soldiers of the late Qing years became early participants in the Republican military. Some retired, taking with them not only weapons but methods, values and ways of being. Some opened schools, bringing with them the drill-based rigour of garrison life. Others became policemen, constables, or simply respected elders, men to whom the younger generation turned when the wind of reform became too loud, too fast. Even in the 20th century in parts of rural China, drills taught to children in community schools were faint echoes of Qing military routines, marching in lines, reciting phrases, polishing shoes, standing at attention. No one may have remembered where these traditions came from, but the shadow of the queue still lingered, not in hairstyle but in rhythm. And yet, legacy is not just practice, it is also caution. The story of the Qing soldier, like all soldiers, reminds us of the fragile line between duty and burden. His silence speaks not only of obedience but of limits. The state asked much of him, and often it gave little back. This imbalance, echoed across empires and centuries, remains relevant. We see his echo in literature, in characters who must carry duty despite disillusionment, in quiet heroes who prefer stillness over acclaim, in stories where strength is found in waiting, not conquering. We see it in art, in scrolls and statues, in performance, in the way modern dramatizations of Qing history often include a lone soldier, standing straight, head bowed, just beyond the spotlight, and we see it in memory. Family trees record sons who vanished at the border. Old poems bear dedications to unnamed soldiers. Temples still house offerings to the ones who never returned. Even state ceremonies, where wreaths are laid and banners raised, reflect this legacy. Transformed, yes, but still rooted in the ancient idea that someone must watch the gate. In this way, the Qing soldier becomes part of a broader continuity, not only within China, but across cultures and generations. His story joins the global archive of ordinary people who, in extraordinary times, gave their labour, breath, and years to something larger than themselves. But let's not lose the particular in the universal. The Qing soldier's legacy is also in the smell of oiled leather, the creak of wooden barracks, the way a boot steps onto stone with a practised care. It is in the hand that braids a queue each morning, in the silence before the drum, in the threadbare corner of a quilt sewn with a line of poetry. A museum in Shandong holds a tiny cup, plain, chipped, unremarkable, until you turn it over and see 5 characters etched faintly beneath. I waited. It was enough. Legacy does not always shout. Sometimes it hums, and sometimes it teaches, gently but firmly. From the Qing soldier we learn the value of constancy, of preparation, of presence. We learn that honour can live in repetition, not only in glory, that protection is often quiet, that endurance can be its own kind of triumph. Modern life tends to prize the spectacular, the immediate, the loud. But the Qing soldier offers a counterpoint, a life lived within the bounds of structure and service, yes, but also of care, of patience, of commitment. This doesn't mean we romanticize hardship. Many soldiers suffered. Many served not out of choice, but necessity. Many died unnamed. Their legacy includes that too, a reminder of the cost of hierarchy, of the way empire can overlook the very hands that uphold it. But even in this critique, there is humanity. Even in the flaws, something remains. Lianjun, whose story we followed earlier, leaves no statue. But his imagined life offers a shape for understanding. A young boy carrying water, a quiet archer on a misty trail, an old man planting a tree beside the river. The soldier is not only the man who fights, he is also the man who returns, who teaches, who remembers. And in remembering him, we remember ourselves, not in grandeur, but in the steady footsteps we take through uncertainty. The Qing soldier becomes a mirror, showing us how humans live when they are asked to carry more than they understand, and they carry it anyway. Now we carry forward, deeper into the soft folds of legacy, where the Qing soldier's presence lives not in body or even in memory, but in how history holds him, how we choose to remember, to forget, to retell. Across China today, remnants of the Qing military system exist not only in museums or dusty archives, but in the quiet decisions that shape public remembrance. How do we teach this part of history? Where is the soldier placed in the story of the nation? As protector, as symbol, as cautionary figure? The answer varies. In some school books, he is a background presence, a figure in an illustration, standing behind officials or beside horses. A caption might note his role during the White Lotus Rebellion or his presence in the Boxer Uprising. But often, he is not the focus. He is not heroic, nor is he shamed. He is simply there. In higher education, the Qing military is studied more analytically as an institution of structure and decline, of ethnic tension between the Manchu-led Eight Banners and the largely Han-Green Standard Army. Scholars explore why the military failed to modernize fast enough, how corruption weakened ranks, how central control eroded as the empire staggered under foreign pressure. Yet even in critique, the soldier himself, the man with dust on his boots and wind in his eyes, is rarely blamed. He is understood as a part of the structure, not its architect, a gear, not the clock. Museums have done more to preserve the physical traces of Qing military life. In Beijing, a collection of uniforms displays the evolution from ceremonial to functional garb, from embroidered dragons to muted greys and cotton padding. Some mannequins wear armour shaped more for show than battle. Others display water-stained boots, worn leather gloves, and powder horns cracked at the rim. In a small exhibit corner, a soldier's satchel sits beneath glass. Inside, a whetstone, a bamboo flute, a needle and thread, a folded slip of paper with writing too faint to read. No grand banner, no list of battles, just the quiet tools of someone who moved, waited, listened. Elsewhere, regional museums maintain their own stories, localized and specific. A town in Hebei showcases a Qing military whistle, found buried near a collapsed watchtower. Another features a woodblock print of soldiers patrolling during a famine, distributing rice. Not all tales are of war. Many are of resilience. In public parks and former training grounds, the layout of drill squares remains visible if you look carefully. The flatness, the stone alignment, the subtle markers where once men stood in formation. Now children run across those fields. Couples walk. Elderly men fly kites where spears once tilted toward the sky. History does not vanish. It softens. In film and television, the Qing soldier has taken on varied roles. In some dramas, he is comic relief. Stiff, confused, outwitted. In others, he is noble, loyal to a fault, doomed by a failing system. A few productions focus entirely on military life, portraying the rhythms of barracks, the camaraderie of service, the sorrow of loss. Not often, but sometimes. The character type endures. The quiet guard at the gate, the weary scout, the reluctant fighter. He may not drive the plot, but his presence grounds it. Reminds viewers that beyond emperors and warlords were men who simply served. Art has also engaged with the Qing soldier in new ways. Contemporary painters occasionally reinterpret old imagery, placing a Qing soldier in surreal settings, blending tradition with modernity. One painting shows a soldier walking through an airport terminal, another seated on a subway, queue-braided, armour beside him. These juxtapositions ask us to reconsider the continuity of duty, of identity. Calligraphers and poets still draw on military metaphors. One recent poem reads, "They asked for orders, I gave them silence, the world turned anyway." In online forums, historical reenactors gather to discuss uniform details, drill routines, and weapon care, not to glorify, but to understand. To stand, briefly, in the posture of someone who once bore weight. Legacy, it seems, is a conversation. there is also critique, and rightfully so. Some scholars argue that the Qing military represents a cautionary tale about ossified hierarchy, about ignoring innovation, about what happens when form overtakes function. Others challenge the romanticization of soldiers, warning against nostalgia that masks exploitation. These critiques matter. They protect memory from becoming myth. They keep us honest. Because the legacy of the Qing soldier includes not just resilience and duty, but also frustration, limitation, and systemic failure. The Qing armies, for all their valour, could not hold back the waves of change that swept in from within and beyond the empire's borders. But legacy is not the same as outcome. Even as the Qing Dynasty fell, the soldier remained, adapting, retiring, disappearing into civil life. Some joined revolutionaries, others resisted, some simply went home. One man, interviewed in the 1930s, then in his 80s, said, "I wore the queue. I marched behind banners. Then one day they said it was over. I untied my hair. I tilled my field. But still, I walk like I'm on duty." His steps outlasted the dynasty. Today, military academies in China sometimes cite Qing traditions when teaching discipline and honour, not as doctrine, but as heritage, a way to root modern service in historical soil. And still, in remote villages, shrines remain. A blade on a wall, a scroll above a door, a tale told under stars. A teacher in Fujian tells her students, "There was once a soldier who stood in the rain so others could sleep. You don't need to know his name, just what he did." In the hush between lesson and bell, that image lingers. So how do we remember? With care, with contradiction, with humility. The Qing soldier's legacy is not a statue. It is a thread, woven through time, sometimes visible, sometimes buried, always connected. In the final canvas, we will bring these threads together, softly, calmly, without grand conclusions, but with a sense of closure, of quiet. Because even stories that never truly end deserve a moment of stillness. We arrive now at the threshold, the final quiet space before the close. This is not a summary, not a flourish, just a last moment of stillness where the story can rest. The Qing soldier has walked with us, not always in focus, but always present, in barracks and fields, in rituals and regrets, in memory and in metaphor. He's not a singular figure, but many, not a fixed image, but a rhythm of steps that echo through halls, hearts, and history. And in this final stretch, we hold a soft light to that rhythm. In personal memory, he is a grandfather's silence, a carved comb, a photograph turned face down after mourning. In institutional record, he is a number, a rank, a battle date, a forgotten commendation. In public imagination, he's both valour and futility, an embodiment of service under strain. But there's something deeper, something beneath all these layers. The Qing soldier is also a question. What does it mean to serve? What does it mean to endure? What remains when duty ends? In the stillness of barracks at night, when no orders are given and no footsteps stir, these questions breathe. And they continue to breathe even after uniforms are folded, after drums go silent. We live in a world still shaped by the actions of those who came before us, those who marched, stood guard, stood down. Their service, whether visible or forgotten, built the scaffolding of modern peace, however unevenly. And yet, for all the soldier endures, he is rarely asked what he carried, what he saw when he stood still. He is noticed when he moves, but often remembered only in absence. A poet from the late Qing period once wrote, "He held no pen, but wrote his life in dust." Wind took the words, yet the shape remained. That shape, faint as it may be, still guides us. In this series, we follow daily routines. The rise and readiness, the meals and marches, the quiet conversations beneath the stars. We entered the life of Lian Jun, a thread through time, fictional but true in spirit. We traced mysteries through shrines and songs, studied the contrasts of elite and common gaze, and wandered gently into legacy, not just what the soldier left behind, but how we hold it now. And through it all, we heard one steady cadence: walk, wait, witness, endure. The Qing soldier did not seek monuments. He sought completion, the day's duty, the next breath, the safety of others. Perhaps that is his truest lesson. Not to chase glory, not to resist change, but to bear witness to history with quiet strength. As this final part unfolds, let us imagine one last scene. A fading afternoon in late autumn. A soldier, no longer young, sits beneath a ginkgo tree outside a walled village. His boots are dusty. His sword is sheathed. A child nearby plays with leaves, unaware of who sits beside him. The soldier watches the horizon, where smoke from evening cooking fires curls into the sky. He does not speak. But if he did, perhaps he would say, "It was not easy, but it was mine." Then he stands, brushes off his hands, and walks toward the sound of home. No parade, no inscription, just footsteps. And in those footsteps, a history not of conquest, but of care. Care that was often overlooked, care that sometimes faltered, but care that was real. Today, when we speak of legacy, we speak not only of systems and outcomes, but of intention. The soldier's intention was simple: to serve, to survive, to return, if possible. Many did not return. Their stories, like footprints in river mud, washed away in time, but the shape of their steps remains. In every community that honours its protectors, in every family that lights incense for the unnamed, in every song where a quiet beat keeps time with memory. The Qing soldier lives not in triumph, but in presence. He is the watch at the edge of memory, the hush before a name is spoken, the breath we take when looking back. And as this penultimate canvas closes, we invite you to pause, not to conclude, but to rest. The final canvas will bring us gently to the end, to a reflection that does not disturb but settles. Not with exclamation, but with breath. Now we arrive. Not at a dramatic finale, not at a crescendo, but at a soft landing. A gentle return from the long path we've walked together, tracing the quiet legacy of the Qing Dynasty soldier. This series was never meant to be exciting. It was meant to be grounding, to offer you a space where time moved slower, where history whispered rather than shouted, and where stories could be felt like wind, present, subtle, and calming. We began with a simple invitation. Imagine a soldier in an ancient empire. And you did. You followed his footsteps from barracks to battlefield, from festival to fog, from remembered name to forgotten grave. You sat beside him while he cleaned his boots, ate his rice, braided his queue, and watched his breath rise in cold dawn air. You glimpsed the life of Lian Jun, not a hero, not a legend, just a man who served, who waited, who tried. Through him, and others like him, we felt the stillness of history, the warmth of a shared meal, the silence of a watchtower at midnight, the brittle edges of duty worn with time. We moved through 5 segments. First, we immersed ourselves in the rhythm of daily life, where drills and chores blended with hope and hunger. Then, we followed the fictional life of one soldier, tracking a career shaped by loyalty, distance, and the relentless march of time. From there, we wandered into mysteries, into shrines and relics, dreams and ghosts, into the parts of history that linger without answers. We looked outward to the society that surrounded these soldiers, the contrast between power and service, the ways in which ordinary people remembered, misunderstood, or simply accepted the presence of those in uniform. And finally, we reached the arc of legacy. We saw how echoes persist, in art, in architecture, in tradition and critique, in empty boots, in remembered steps. Together, all of these threads wove a single garment, the enduring presence of the Qing soldier. Not as conqueror or failure, but as witness, as function, as feeling. So what remains, now that the journey is done? Only this, that every life, even one lived in obedience and obscurity, carries a story worth listening to. That the slow breath of history, when heard in the hush of night, can soothe rather than stir. That duty, however flawed, can coexist with gentleness, and that looking back calmly and carefully teaches us not just about the past, but about the dignity of the present. Tonight, if sleep has come for you during this journey, then the story has done its part. And if not, if you're still with me now, then perhaps we've simply walked a little further than expected. Let the final image be simple. A lantern swinging gently at the edge of a garrison gate. A soldier standing nearby, not tense, not weary, just present. His face is turned toward the road. He watches, he waits, and soon he will rest too. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you deeply for remembering. Good night.